If you're I done goofed and over exfoliated, what should I do?
Stop, drop, and roll.
Well,
Incentella. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Chemist Confessions podcast. I am Gloria.
I'm Victoria.
This is a podcast on all the skincare science we talk about on the daily, and today's episode is everything exfoliation.
Yeah. Not just the AHAs. We're also talking about the scrubbies.
Which I don't think we've ever done anything on that.
You'll see. The science, I think, already tells you how much you could actually talk about it.
Yeah,
so,
this might be the only episode we ever do this on. Yeah, anyway. But before that, let's share some nice words about our products.
All right. We have to share. We got a 1-star review, and I shall read it now. The title is Mr. Reliable is aptly named. An excellent moisturizer, light enough to use under sunscreen. It does have a scent, but it is not cloying.
Oh, I love that word.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think it is the ingredients and not an added perfume. My skin is improving daily since I found this company. 1 star.
It's 1 golden star. Thank you.
You know, I gotta say though, I have seen my dad fat finger Uber reviews and he will freak out, like where he writes, he actually does like give them all the little awards and gives them a nice tip, and then like 1 star, and then he's like, no, like how do I go back and do that? So yeah, I feel this a lot.
Yeah, no offense taken. Definitely made us chuckle.
Yeah.
Because we get notifications when we get a new review, and when you see a 1 star, you're like, oh man.
Yeah.
Like, probably didn't work out well for this person.
Yeah, you guys think we might not see them, but
we do.
No.
We see every single one.
We made these formulas, so we're gonna be reading every one of these.
And there are days like when I see the notification on 1 star, I'm like, I'm gonna read this later. I don't want to read it now. And when you eventually click into this one, you're like, oh, it's a nice 1-star review.
1-star review. Yeah. And she also leaves her skin types very kind. She has dry skin, she does have sensitivity, and she also shares her routine as well. So thank you so much. All right, we're going to move on to Gold Standard. The title is amazing. And she writes, really helped refine pores and smooth out texture around my nose. Also helped lighten some hyperpigmentation around my cheeks.
Yes! That's actually, it's short and sweet, but it's actually everything we want to accomplish with Gold Standard. This one has, Gold Standard is our exfoliating treatment that can be used as a rinse-off mask or as a booster that you can mix a drop into your serum or moisturizer. Mix them well. Do not leave a dollop and then just like smear on your face for a boost. And because it comes with 30% glycolic acid, it's not for the beginner. It's not for people with very sensitive skin or AHA sensitive skin, but it is supposed to pack a very hefty punch of efficacy. So really glad that this person, saw the improvement that she's looking for.
Yeah. All right. And the last one we'll have Gloria read is about baby steps.
This one was my favorite. And as soon as I read it, I was like, this is going to podcast. Short and sweet, the title is Baby Skin, and the review is Dolphin Skin.
With a smiley face.
I should call out that this Baby Steps is kind of the foil product to Gold Standard. It also has a very high active load. It has 30% gluconolactone PHA and 15% gentle AHA lactic acid. It sounds really high, but it is a very, very gentle blend of products, and you can use it the exact same way as Gold Standard, either as a 10-minute rinse-off mask or as a booster to your serum or your moisturizer. Yeah. For the sensitive skin individual. So I'm glad you have discovered your dolphin skin companion.
Yep. So as you can tell, we love all of our reviews. We're so grateful to our customers for leaving them, and they not only share their experience, but also share their skin type and their routine. So we definitely encourage anyone that's been curious about our line to definitely take a look and skim the reviews for yourself. They are not paid for. So yeah.
Yep, you can use, for podcast listeners, you can use the code PODCASTSHIP to get free shipping on any order. And that's it.
All right. Let's get into the meat. And meat part 1 is, I think, to me, a fun one because it's not something we talk about a lot. We will review why you should exfoliate. Then we will also talk about all the physical exfoliants, mainly the scrubs. Yeah. All right. So first things first, what is cell turnover and why would anybody care about this phenomenon?
So your skin is an organ that's constantly renewing itself. The whole journey starts from the very base layer of skin. Cells will move through the layers through a process called cornification, which means it slowly goes from a living cell until it goes to your strand corneum and turns into that completely dead, cornified, or like really thin, dead
Thin.
layer, like pancakey
Mhm.
form of skin cells. And by the time it gets to the outer layer, it forms into this basically protective layer. That's the skin barrier that we talk about so much. And then eventually it's gonna leave. It's gonna shed.
It needs to shed
Yes,
so that it can make room for all of these new cells that are coming to the surface.
exactly.
And that phenomenon is called desquamation.
Yep. And this process as a whole is called cell turnover. In healthy adult skin, this can last anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks. Everyone's skin is a little different, but generally speaking, if you have problematic skin or you're just aging, that process can slow down.
Yes.
And your SC can, those dead skins on top of your strand corneum can overstay their welcome.
Yeah. And when that happens, you get this buildup of all of those keratinocytes that just gotta go. And when that happens, you get dull texture, you get rough surface. It can actually lead to dry skin. So it's it's probably one of the first, like, I would want to say skin conditions that just kicks off a cascade of things, other skin concerns that you don't want to deal with.
Yep.
So this is why, as unglamorous as it sounds, this phenomenon actually it's so important to think about and consider because it's going to be just step one of any sort of general skin health care.
Yep. So if you are convinced to get on board with exfoliant, a lot of people's entry to exfoliating is actually physical exfoliants. Those are the good old scrubby beads. And
You think that's the same for Gen Z now? Or
I don't know.
Because for us, yes, scrubs were the way to go.
Calling all Gen Z listeners, please tell me what your intro to exfoliation is, because I don't know. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But there are only
Is it just us? Please tell me it's not just us.
Oh God, I don't know anything about the youth of today anymore. We digress. But generally speaking, there are two main ways to exfoliate when you're at home. One is physical exfoliants. That's your scrubbies mainly. Or chemical exfoliation using your AHAs like glycolic acid. But we're going to start by diving a little deeper into physical exfoliation.
Yeah, I love what you did. And so Gloria actually spent some time to look at different types of scrubs.
Oh my God.
And it was actually pretty fun to look at.
Yeah, it's really wild. This was a topic we've been, I don't want to say avoiding, but we just didn't find that there would be enough to talk about for a long time. Because we'll be honest, physical exfoliation is a category where there's not a lot of science or data behind it.
What researcher is going to spend their time dissecting beads and how they roll on skin?
I feel like we're about to, oh my God, if we get a PhD of scrubby bees right into us, I'd be stoked. Yeah. But to start, before we get into the scrubbies, you might hear that cleansing brushes is a way to gently physically exfoliate as well. And we actually did kind of look into it because that's actually, I feel like this is something that I was a little curious about. It makes sense logically, but does it actually work? And good old Clarisonic actually did do a study where they stained skin all the way to the more like deeper layers with this fluorescent dye. And then they compare skin, that level of fluorescence with just regular cleansing versus with their
cleansing
brush. And showed, and we'll show the chart here, that with the sonic brush, that fluorescence disappeared faster, meaning the skin was able to completely cycle through that fluorescence dye faster. For the word for faster.
Yes, cleansing brushes C.
Yes. So you can tell that it does work as something that helps skin move along a little faster. But we do want to call out that difference isn't too great. And you will see from the chart that the degree of difference is small. So we will classify this as a pretty gentle exfoliant. We're not expecting to use this once and all the fluorescent dye gets scrubbed out. So yeah.
And we should say Clarisonic has, and is Clarisonic even around anymore? I don't know, but they had different brush heads as well.
Yes.
So it also can be pending the degree, or I guess the degree of softness or hardness of the brush. So that's something to think about. Yeah.
Oh my God. Is Clarisonic around anymore? RIP. Oh, okay. Anyway, thank you for doing the study, Clarisonic.
R.I.P.
We'll remember you.
All right. So, yeah, so some cleansing brushes can suffice. I think what's tough about the cleansing brush category is you can buy some really dinky ones anywhere. I think I've even seen a cleansing brush in like what is that? No, what's that store that's kind of like a unique? No, they sell all the little trinkets.
Oh, like Daiso? Miniso.
Like you can buy cleansing brushes at like Miniso for like $5. I don't know what level of exfoliation you're gonna get with that. So
I will say, I personally prefer like dumb cleansing brushes, as in just a brush. I don't have to charge you because I'm gonna
like you mechanically brush.
Yeah, and I do think it helps. Like you can definitely notice a softer texture afterwards, like a better cleanse. When I went to Japan earlier this year, I stumbled on the store. It's in this very touristy part of town, and it's like the brush store. It's anything from like toilet brushes to like makeup brushes.
Okay, so literally any
brush store. And their whole thing is they use the best bristles. Like they have a whole thing. It's like very Japanese. It's a whole craftsmanship on how do you get the best boar's hairbrush.
Oh my
How do you get the
gosh.
best like whatever blah blah
That's
blah.
awesome.
And then they also talked about like, oh, how do you do it without like animal cruelty and So they have things that ranges from coarseness level to whatever. And I really wanted to buy their facial cleansing brush because it's like luxuriously soft, it has a really good story, and they have a little like demo sink and you can see how it helps lather and all that stuff. Even with the yen being so cheap, it was like $150.
Oh my god. Yep. Okay, that makes sense.
I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna buy it. And I was like, turn around to my husband and I was like, you know what? You can't stop me. I'm gonna buy this brush. And yeah, I didn't look at the price yet. And I was like, I'm gonna spend some stupid money on this brush. In the back of my mind, I was like, yeah, I dropped $60 on this brush. And I saw the price. I was like, oh. And
this is beyond stupid money.
Yeah, and they have like a whole to convince you to spend that money. They have like the classic poster of a bald older man who's like hand shaping the brush, and I'm like, oh, I'm so tempted, but I can't justify it.
I can't imagine how much their makeup brushes would cost you.
Oh, they're about $100 a pop.
Yeah, I ain't that talented.
Yeah, no, I am someone that has spent like northward of $80 on a very fancy makeup brush before, a Shu Uemura one back in the day, and I bought it thinking that's gonna turn me into an artiste.
Not only an artiste, my face will look amazing.
Great brush, very gentle. I am no artiste to this day, so that's why I can no longer justify spending stupid money on brushes because I'm like, come on, man, what am I really doing with this brush?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Side story.
We digress, but yeah. The cleansing brush world, you can have as amazing of a brush as that or a Miniso one. So there's a little bit of there is some guesswork in this realm.
Yeah, we would say target gentleness for sure. It needs to, when you feel it on your dry skin, it should feel like nothing because you don't need it to be that harsh. And I will say, I have also tried really cheap brushes for funsies. It should not, after you're done using the brush, it should not be leaving bristles behind on your face. Yes, because the $5 ones, all bets are off.
Yeah, that's a good point. The next category we should talk about before scrubbies is dermaplaning.
Yes. It works.
Should you do it? Can you do it?
I've had dermaplaning done before with an esthetician. It's awesome. It does work super duper well. It's very satisfying to see the crap that they scrape off your face. Yeah. And now you can do it at home. Brands like Versed and I think a couple other places, they sell the dermaplaning blades that you can use at home. I don't trust myself in execution.
It's all about the user skill, right? So, yeah, I agree. I probably would never venture in this realm myself either. I'm not that I don't have the dexterity for it.
Yeah, and I think like the contour of your face and like I've seen a lot of videos of people saying like, oh my god, today we're doing dermaplaning at home and I'm using this blade and here's how I'm doing it, and they make it look so easy. Yeah. I just want to say that I watch a lot of how to cut hair at home videos during COVID. And I cut my husband's hair once and he never even let me get near him with a pair of scissors ever again. There is execution difficulties.
No, that's a really good point.
So unless you feel comfortable enough like dermaplaning a peach and do it successfully, you probably shouldn't do it on your actual face.
That's a good point. All right. So other than that, let's get into the scrubbies.
The meat, the true meat.
We should talk about, first of all, we mentioned the science. And Gloria found a really great paper that I think we have to share.
Mm-hmm.
This was done by a lab in China
Mm-hmm.
where they actually looked at 3 types of scrubs. These are all commercial scrubs, but they did not say what they were.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually tested them on subjects, 20 of them. And what is so fascinating is the level of analysis that they performed.
This poor undergrad.
Yeah.
To do this.
They're looking at the frictional behavior, where they actually come up with a friction coefficient.
Mm-hmm.
They look at the skin surface characterization, where they actually take SEM imaging, which
Wow.
unbelievable. They do 3D modeling of the skin surface morphology, and they also measure the contact angle of skin. So that's the level of analysis that they did, which is already, we have to talk about it. So in this study, I had mentioned they looked at 3 types of scrub. One is a irregular shape, slightly jagged, but more uniform in size. And they
Mhm.
mentioned that it's higher in concentration. So you think of if you think of grit, you think of like a very high grit, right?
Mhm.
They also mentioned the second scrub is an apricot shell particle. It's rounded, but the size of these scrub beads are not as uniform. What we mean by that is some are small, some are much bigger in size. And then the third one is actually a much softer bead, but this bead is a lot more uniform and there's less concentration of this bead. So in the first one, we mentioned high concentration. So this one, when you rub it, you're probably going to feel a little bit of like a gap
Mhm.
when you're feeling the beads. I hope people understand what that means. So yeah. So I think the thing that we have to share is that despite doing all of this analysis, this was their conclusion.
Uh-huh.
So the first thing is that aged overdue stratum corneum can be removed with mechanical exfoliation.
Well, I will hope it does something. So yes, physical exfoliation does work.
So,
Got it.
yes, it works. And this is regardless of the shape, size, concentration. So it's just a matter of level. And I
Mhm.
think that was actually a lot harder for them to figure out.
Mhm.
The only real conclusion they could make was that surprisingly, this rounded apricot seed
Mhm.
with medium hardness, despite having the various differing
Size.
sizes
Mhm.
of beads, seemed to perform the best by improving skin roughness. And they found that in some of their measurements that led to skin having greater skin conductance, hydration, and adhesion. And these are all properties that just generally lead to better skin health.
Mhm.
That's it. They did all this work. They did all those measurements. And that's generally the main conclusion after all of these measurements they took.
We'll say I do love the picture, the
Yeah.
imaging they take. You can very obviously see how the physical exfoliants were able to take
Mhm.
away skin, the
Mhm.
old, rough, dried out skin.
Hmm.
But I think in a way it's not surprising to me
Yeah.
that they couldn't draw any firm conclusions
Yeah.
other than they all work.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Because the reality is A, it's a small study. B, there's a lot of variables to look at.
Yeah.
And just you know what? I can't fault the study because we couldn't find anyone else who did this.
Yeah. And Gloria's absolutely right. The number of variables you'd have to test, think about, like we were saying, the size of the bead,
Mhm.
the uniformity. Like, yes, some beads are these more like jagged, they kind of look like jagged blades almost, and
Mhm.
some are really nicely rounded. Some beads are soft, some beads are firm, So there's all these variables you would have to look at, and you might end up with the same conclusion that these guys ended up with.
Yep.
So yeah, but I just think it's a really interesting study to share, and it also sums up why we don't have a lot to share in this general realm. But Gloria actually looked at some products, so let's see.
Of course, we have to start with St. Ives, the ever so classic apricot scrub
Yeah.
that everyone, if you are a millennial, don't lie, you've used this before. And of course, in recent years, it's gotten a lot of flack for using basically what people accuse them of using crappy, jagged
Mhm.
exfoliants that's causing micro tears in skin.
Mhm.
Next is another classic, very popular physical exfoliant, Kate Somerville's Exfoliate. And then we also have Bliss's microdermabrasion scrub. And last but not least, this is a random cleansing scrubby thing that I picked up from Asia. It's a brand called Naruko. But you will see in the texture, it's a very, very classic like gel with like pretty suspended beads that you'll see.
Yeah.
And we decided to take microscope images of all these particles just to see what's up. And excuse the quality. This is us using a microscope slide that has a scale, so you can kind of gauge like relative sizing between these products, and then I put my phone on the microscope to try to get a picture. It's a little janky.
Our microscope does not have digital imaging.
Yeah, correct. So first off is St. Ives. St. Ives, I think, has definitely since reformulated. In their fresh skin product, they have a combination of walnut shell powder and the classic apricot seed. And kind of like the Chinese paper Victoria mentioned, you'll see that it has a big size distribution. Even in the little chunk that I was able to smear and capture on the microscope, you'll see really big particles versus much smaller ones. So there's a lot of distribution there. And the corners are round. This is not nearly as jagged as people think it is.
Yeah. And the next one, Exfoliate.
Oh, that one was tough to take pictures.
Yep. We had to put some arrows so you guys could see what we were looking at. But yes, eventually Gloria was able to kind of get an image of some of these beads. You'll notice these would be considered like the jagged type of beads. They're obviously a lot more uniform in size. But yeah, and I guess Gloria, can you comment? I've actually never used this product. Can you comment on the actual feel?
It definitely feels pretty abrasive, and they do position it as like kind of a high strength level. And we should mention
The
this
microdermabrasion.
and this formula also uses some level of AHAs. It definitely feels gritty, that's for sure. And I think something that I should mention is that I had a really hard time getting pictures for this one because Exfoliate, if you have used it before, when you spread it,
It's like a paste.
it's like a paste, and obviously on the microscope, you'll see in one of our images, it kind of comes out in clumps. So then I can't get it down to, I can't smear a thin, even of slide to see the particles. I had to like move it around, and once I move it around too much, it's too dispersed, and I couldn't find the particles. So it took a lot of like back and forth before I was even able to find the particles. Something to note is that it's very fine. It is tiny compared to St. Ives.
Yeah. And then the fourth is Bliss, which is even more interesting.
Yeah, so Bliss uses pumice. Pumice is basically crushed rocks that's used as exfoliant. This, like the exfoliate, is positioned as a more microdermabrasion level. This one, you can tell from the microscope slide that it has these streaks. And interesting enough, that's how it spreads, right? It spreads into this super even paste. More even than exfoliate. Exfoliate, as you smear around, it kind of comes off in like clumps. But this was also really hard for me to spread a layer thin enough to capture the particles.
Yeah, and they're much smaller.
They look like they're even finer than on the exfoliate particles. They do appear to be a little bit on the jagged side as well. It looks more
not as rounded.
Yeah, it looks more crystalline. Okay, so that's the microdermabrasion. Last but not least, I had another problem with Naruko. Naruko uses a form that is very popular as a replacement for the PE plastic beads. They're the jojoba beads. And as you can see, they're also big. They're very big in size. It was a different kind of hard for me to find the particles because you can already visually see the beads in the formula. It's not dense at all. There's not a lot of particles. So once you spread, there's like 3 beads on the slide, and I had to like move around the slide, tickle it just to find the beads. They're big. They're also not as round as the walnut and the apricot shells. But I wouldn't say that's fully jagged either, just because it's big and soft.
Yeah, I would say like compared to St. Ives is more rounded, but these weirdly enough look like rocks.
Yeah, they're rocks, but something that we don't have the instruments to measure that paper Victoria found mentioned is the hardness of these particles, because that also matters.
Yes.
For this one, I can say jojoba beads, like they don't feel as hard at all. They
usually can be a little bit more softer. Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of plays in tandem with the actual shape of the bead as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of imaging later. Here are some recommendations. Here's some of the takeaways we have from this.
For sure. I think the first thing is first of all, what is the general feel that you want to try to look for in some of these exfoliating products? And we would say you want to feel kind of like that even grit that's similar to like sandpaper. That is probably a much more efficient way of mechanically exfoliating compared to, let's say, like a Naruko. You can see just the density of beads that Gloria was able to get is much more sparse. So if you think about how that less amount of exfoliation rubbing around your skin, that efficiency is just not going to be as good.
Yeah, so if you squeeze out a dollop and you can count the number of beads you see, I wouldn't even call it an exfoliating
Yeah,
product.
good
Because if
point.
you feel like 10 beeswax sliding around your entire face, like what does that really do?
Yeah. So density of these exfoliating beads, we would say something you can help that you can use to decide between products.
We would say that in terms of like the finer beads
Mm,
versus like the bigger ones,
mm,
I think they will both work, and this is all theory, right?
mm.
This is not based on testing, or it's like it's just a feel, right?
Yeah.
They will both work, but it does kind of depend on what you're looking for.
Mm,
What you will get from like a big round bead like the St. Ives versus a microdermabrasion is very different.
yeah.
And I mean, if you think about it, if you use a bigger grit size
Yep.
sandpaper, what you're trying to accomplish is very different than a very fine sandpaper.
I think that's a really good point, and I think probably one of the things that's maybe feels so jarring for people that have maybe just stumbled upon the St. Ives apricot scrub is that just that level of grit is so much can feel very harsh.
Because it's
And
big. Yeah.
yes, because it's like a bigger particle. So because of that, I think maybe there to kind of an asterisk to add to this is it shouldn't feel painful to
Yeah.
apply onto face. You
Yeah.
know, like that's it. Skincare should never be a scenario where you're like, this is not a fun experience, but it's supposed to be good for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I would say you don't necessarily need to do a scrubby if you have a gentle cleansing brush that you
Mhm.
like already.
Yeah.
And the reality is, I think in a way, brushes, for me personally, are almost more reliable than a scrubby, right? So if you have something that's not quite the right density, I mean, if you think about it, you're definitely always exfoliating that nose to cheek area more. And by the time you get to
Yeah.
other parts, the particles already spread out. That density
Yeah.
is not consistent.
Yeah.
So I would say that might be a good alternative. And last but not least, definitely be gentle with it.
Yes.
I think some people hurt themselves because, or like the whole micro tear issue is not necessarily a reflection on the formulas, but how hard some people exfoliate.
Yeah. If you feel the need to put your back into it, you're really feeling that wrist action to make sure you're getting just enough buff. You don't need to do that. None of these formulas are designed to be where you're like viciously scrubbing at your face. They're really doing kind of actually, if you've ever gone to estheticians, you should also feel like they're not actually applying a lot of pressure,
Yeah,
right?
not at
It's a
all.
glide. It's not like a we're really getting in the crevices. Like that shouldn't be the motion.
Glide. I think glide is a
Yeah.
key operative word
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
I'm definitely guilty back in school. If I'm using a
Yes.
scrub, I'm like,
Yep.
like I am pushing into my skin.
Yes. And all people who've dealt with acne previously definitely know that they've tried, basically trying to buff the acne out of their face, which is not how that
Yeah, you
works.
definitely don't need to be doing that. We did
Yeah.
find a Japanese paper
Mm.
that also looked into this one is also very torturous. They actually came up with a machine that applied the scrubby on pig skin, and they apply
Bless
it
their
at different
hearts.
pressure, and with all the setup, they had to validate the setup,
Yeah.
and they have to get the pig skin, and they had to get the scrubby. And I can just say, spare everyone the details. A lot of work later, the conclusion is yes, the more force you apply, the more likely you are to damage your skin. The end.
I feel like these researchers in this realm just deserve like a Mother Teresa award because I just feel like there's truly no one else that would be going to this like such great lengths to try to, I guess, give us that evidence to say yes, be gentle. That's
Yeah,
it.
that's
Go
it.
on.
For generally speaking, we would still recommend combining a physical exfoliant in your routine with your AHAs.
Mm.
But we'll get into that in the second part.
All right. We're gonna take a break.
Yay!
It's time to
Break
break it up. Time for Animal Fun Fact Corner.
All right, today is all about peacocks.
We're back at peacocks again,
Yeah.
guys, because they're back.
Because they never left.
They never left, and they're being a menace.
Yep.
And I guess the theme of this year's Animal Fun Fact is who are the menaces out there?
I feel like this is a great way for us to wrap up this year. It's like every episode we'll just find a new menace. But yes, we talked about this all the way back in episode 21. I believe that's
Wow.
2021.
Wow.
Yep.
Before we had seasons.
Before we had seasons. Yep. But that one was about the local peacocks in
Yeah.
the East LA area that we
Yeah.
went into. But I didn't know this actually. They're also in South Florida.
Everything's in South Florida, right?
Everything grows not just in South Florida. They get bigger, badder, and they're just always more problematic in Florida. It's my theory. But yes, they are, because they're pretty. They're a protected species there.
course.
You get a lot of trouble for hurting one.
We all know what that means.
That means in the past 10 years, their population has 10x in Florida.
Dear God.
I think it used to be like a shooting star thing where it's like, Mom, look, there's a wild peacock. It's like, oh my God, that's so cute. And then turn into like, oh my God, there's 10 of them on my roof.
Yeah. All right, what's going on with the peacocks in South Florida?
So, particularly in the suburbs of Miami, it's starting to cause a lot of damage. So, the residents.
I have this theory that when you have an overpopulation of any type of bird in any type of area, you get damage. This is what I'm just going to assume.
I think, was that an episode we did on condors to talk about how acidic their discharges are, and it brought like
even
loose.
like chickens and pigeons, man, they're all bad.
Yeah. So the residents don't want to hurt them. They don't want to call them off, and they don't know what to do because it's causing so much issues. So recently I saw a headline with on the New York Times. It's a very pretty picture of a peacock with the title "Peacocks Found in Paradise in a Miami Suburbs. Now they're getting vasectomy." So I'm like, oh my God, what the heck? A peacock vasectomy?
I guess it makes sense if stray cats and dogs, they get spayed.
Yeah.
It's time for stray peacocks to get spayed.
Yeah, it's a TNR program for peacocks.
All right, go on. Why are they getting vasectomy? What happened?
For an NPR interview, and I just pulled direct quotes from this interview, the vet that they're interviewing said, the most important factor in this whole process is recognizing that the male peacock is polygamous and the females, the peahens, are actually loyal. Raising my eyebrows a little bit here, but it's true. I have seen, oh my God, in Arcadia, I have seen a beautiful, glorious peacock on a tree, and I kid you not, his bitches are just like around him. There was at least like 10
Living
other
a great
peahens.
life.
Yeah, just
very old school life.
You just hear him like call as you drive past, like, I'll look at my harem, and I am very proud. So basically, if you sterilize the male, you prevent half a dozen or like 7 to 10 females from reproducing. So it's very effective.
That's a lot of females per one male.
Yeah. So if the direct quote is, if we neuter the males, we will certainly stop them from reproducing like you do in cats and dogs. But we will also eliminate their dominance. So that changes their social structure. So the procedure is simply disconnecting the testicles from the rest of the reproductive tract. That way.
Disconnecting is a funny word.
Yep.
Let's just unplug it.
Unplug it. So they retain their testosterone levels, they retain their dominance and their cocky qualities. They keep their females, but they're sterile. I'm like, oh, that is so smart. Because like I don't think most people think about the difference between like lobbing off the whole thing versus a vasectomy.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep. And the vet goes on to say, the vasectomies, it is ridiculously easy and safe. It takes me about 3 minutes per testicle.
Nice.
I'm like, wow.
He's like, oh.
All in a day's job. Go on now. Go back to your harem. So yeah, I think that was hilarious.
I was so fascinated by this. I kind of wanted to look at what other peacock news is out there. And I think in this, with the issue going on in Miami, I like hearing from the actual residents that live in these areas. So one of their quotes that someone said was, I know everyone sees them and they're like, oh, they're so beautiful. But when you have a pack of 20 squawking at 3 in the morning,
they're very loud.
It gets a little annoying and everybody calls their county commissioner.
Poor commissioner.
And what this other line really got me, they said, when they see their reflection in cars and in windows, they attack it. They get up on top of the roof. They're very protective about their nest. And I don't know if anyone has ever dealt with mockingbirds, but mockingbirds can also be very territorial when they're nesting. But I cannot imagine a giant bird with these tails like being protective over their nest, which might be on your roof. Like, what do you do? So I found that entertaining. They interviewed another resident who basically was like, I really don't mind the peacocks. It's the iguanas that are worse. You need to render them unreproductive or whatever the word is. So I thought that was great.
Actually, I feel like there has to be a poll out there, right? Floridians, like least favorite critters, because there are a lot of critters in Florida.
Yeah. And then it got me thinking, okay, Gloria and I live in LA. Plenty of peacocks out here as well. What's going on with them? And it seems like they're also quite a menace. They have been interviewing a few of them and actually are interviewing our area, which is Pasadena. And one of the residents actually says, It sounds like babies being tortured and with a close-up microphone. It's very shocking.
I can confirm. Yeah.
There's no way you can sleep through it, and it's extremely distracting.
Accurate.
Yeah, and so back in December 2nd of 2022, after several city council meetings, petitions, and an open forum, South Pasadena has become the latest California city to remove the peafowl and relocate them to private farms, ranches, and open spaces. And they're looking for volunteers to basically place these like 10 by 10 foot cages in their yards to aid with the trapping efforts. And
This is really messed up, but I'm just picturing like this is like the way Ron DeSantis shipped all migrants. I didn't know that they're shipping them off to a farm. I hope they're not driving into like the next county.
California's doing the same thing, but it's peacocks.
The next county over, Bakersfield, you're next. My bad.
Yep. And did you know that Los Angeles County officially banned feeding roaming peafowl in 2021? So offenders who feed them face a $1,000 fine or up to 6 months in prison. That's how bad peacocks have gotten in Los Angeles.
I believe it because I mean they are pretty and it's definitely a novelty, right? Like the first time I ever visited LA and I forgot where I was staying at, but I saw a peacock. I thought it was someone's pet that got out because I'd never seen a wild peacock before. And I was chasing. I was like, "Oh my god, I have wild peacocks! How charming!" And I'm sure lots of people are like, "Oh, how charming!" And then feed them stuff, and then the peacocks are just like, "Quack!"
Yeah, because we all know there are people that feed squirrels.
Yeah,
y'all are also feeding peacocks. We know some of y'all are out there. So, anyways, that's the peacock menace. Yay!
Yay! What will be menacing us next? Stay tuned.
We're moving on to meat part 2. It's time to review the chemical exfoliants.
All right, we're going to try to make this relatively brief because we have done a lot of work talking about your AHAs. So as a super quick run through, when you're exfoliating chemically, you're probably using one of the following ingredients: glycolic acid, lactic acid, mandelic acid, salicylic acid, or your PHAs, that's your gluconolactone or lactobionic acid. We should mention that a common misconception here is that not all acids are exfoliating acids. We are usually only referring to your AHAs, BHAs, and PHAs.
Yes, it doesn't include tranexamic, azelaic, hyaluronic, anything with an acid, ascorbic acid. No. These are not exfoliating.
Yep. And I think physical exfoliants, how they work is very intuitive. They work like your sandpaper. You're just removing the top layer. But for chemical exfoliants, they interact with some of the adhesion between your corneal sites, weaken them so that they can more easily shed.
Yeah, so think about they basically form these bonds, then that's why they stay together, and sometimes that can be very stubborn, so you want to loosen and like Gloria said, weaken and loosen so that they more easily will expunge themselves. But otherwise, we're just not going to go into too much of the additional science around this. We think it'll be a lot more helpful to just do a refresher on the product landscape for you guys to understand how to navigate when, AHAs, BHAs, PHAs, when do you gravitate to any of these three, and then how to even shop for it. So, yeah.
I mean, to start, AHAs work. They work really well. They can give you anything, benefits from just gently exfoliating, even hydrating, all the way to tackling that hyperpigmentation, keep your acne at bay, and your pores clear.
Yeah, and has one of the most robust data sets around it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even you will sometimes hear anti-aging claims like diminish the look of wrinkles, and these are all true, but it can kind of depend on how you're using your AHAs. So to start, you will find your AHAs, BHAs, PHAs in cleanser, toners, serums, masks. I'm sure I'm leaving some off because it's in everything.
Yeah, so you're probably already wondering what is the best product format that is right for you. For us, our general stance is we're a little bit more traditional in that we know that leave-ons are the best way to get the most out of your actives, but in this realm of chemical exfoliants, percentage matters. So we would say your general serums is probably the best way to take advantage of these nightly. So if you're one that's kind of like, I just want to set it and forget it, stick to a pretty standard routine every day, you would want to look for, especially in the AHA realm, anywhere between 5 to 10%. Even 10, 12% nightly for nightly use. That would probably be the first, like most traditional format to trial that in. They can also come in toner. I feel like we should also say toners and serums. I feel like these two can kind of overlap.
Yeah, and I would say definitely this is a just choose one scenario.
Yeah.
You really don't need both a toner with
Yeah.
AHA and a serum with
No.
AHAs.
No.
I would say if you're a sensitive skin, you're just starting out, a toner might be an okay starting point,
Mhm.
but between toner and serum, which one's better? It depends. Like Victoria said, it can overlap. So do a quick decode. The percentage matters. There's no need to move on from a 7% toner
Yep.
to a 10% serum because it's really probably not that different.
And then for masks, we say this is probably the most common format for higher home peels,
Hmm.
like we discussed in the previous episode. So you're looking at, percentage of 20 to 30%. These should definitely be wash offs.
Hmm.
So, it really depends on what your goal is for this AHA, how you want to use it, and the percentage you're trying to, I guess, take on.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Cleansers is probably the weirdest one out of all of these. We would
Hmm.
say it's the most gentle way of sure, is gentle the best way? I would say it's like
The most questionably efficacious way.
lowest risk.
Yes.
Lowest risk. And then, for anybody that has like an acne routine that already has a lot of these like more, I would
Heavy
say
hitting
volatile,
actives.
heavy
Hmm.
hitting actives, a cleanser format can be helpful if you have nowhere else to put it but are trying to squeeze this in. Yeah.
Yeah. So to sum up, a cleanser should be there to supplement your routine. Toners and serums, just pick one, and that's your daily upkeep, and expect general improvements in skin texture.
Yeah.
And we will say at this level, at the 10% level, you might see some other improvements too in terms of skin hydration and also some brightening benefits. But if you're really, let's say you really wanted to be part of your hyperpigmentation routine, or even to diminish the look of fine lines, you're really targeting a home peel level of
Mhm.
efficacy.
And I think one thing I thought of and I realized when sometimes we help our followers look at their routines is
Hmm.
you should never feel like you need to get them all. Like this is
Yes.
not Pokemon. You need to collect all of these exfoliants to make the most out of this category.
Hmm.
It's totally fine to only have one, you
Yeah,
know.
for sure.
Yeah.
And I would say that if you're aiming for that really high level efficacy, if you have say a toner as daily upkeep and a once a week home peel mask
Yeah.
as a more heavy hitting efficacy, that's totally fine. But if you want to keep it simple again, it's all about being real with what you're going to be consistent with.
Yes.
It will also be fine.
Yeah, totally. All right. One thing we should review is pH.
Yeah.
We should review what pH to aim for. You want to look for anything between general
say
3.5 to
3.5.
4, even 3.8 is that sweet spot we like. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I would say anything above 4 is probably on the way too gentle side of things.
Yeah. And then we should review how do you onboard your AHA product if you are trialing this category for the very first time.
Well, it depends on which product you're jumping into right away. So you mentioned from the product landscape, you might want to look for a toner serum or serum first. We would say for most people, for most skin types, anything from a 5 to 8% is a great place to start of
Mm.
any molecule. And let's say if you start out with a glycolic, you find it too harsh, you might want to try a lactic in that same concentration range to see if that works better for you. And we would say cleanser is probably a most terrible product to start gauging whether or not the AHA works for you.
Ain't gonna show you anything.
Yeah. At the toner serum level, you can jump into using a daily probably
Mm.
almost right away. But if you're very sensitive, you're concerned, we would say every other night to start.
For sure. All right. Maybe another question you have is how do you use AHAs with exfoliating scrubs and devices? This is actually pretty common. Sometimes, especially for AHA vets,
Mhm.
you may find that skin just has very congested moments where your AHA product that you live by is just not doing enough. And this
Mhm.
is when we would say adding that scrub or that a little bit of mechanical exfoliation can just help it a little bit. This especially is helpful with very stubborn blackheads. So a lot of times, at least for me, I prefer doing the AHA first and
Mhm.
then finishing with the scrub. There's really I don't know Laura, if you do the opposite, but I find that there's not really a hard rule for doing one before the other.
I think I don't. I generally use AHAs consistently as a once a week rinse off mask,
Mm,
and that's just me. For me, I like to keep my daily steps pretty simple.
mm,
And for physical exfoliation, this isn't very strict. Obviously for most physical exfoliants, you use it in your cleansing stuff. It's either rinse off scrubby or a cleansing brush. And I think actually a lot of people overdo this stuff. Some people mechanically exfoliate every day.
Yeah,
I don't think
that's a good point.
Yeah, I don't think you need to at all because I am on a once a week high level AHA routine. I would do the same thing for physical, once a week physical exfoliation.
Do you do it at the same time or are they staggered?
Offset. So I will
okay.
probably scrub middle of the week and say AHA at the end of the week.
Got it.
That is my ideal routine. I will say I don't keep track. I really don't wake up and say today's Wednesday, it's exfoliation day. I just kind of freeform it, and for me, the AHA routine is more important to me to be consistent with. The physical exfoliation is kind of like a me time moment. Yeah, it's kind of like I think I can use a oomph, so I'm gonna scrub my face today.
That's a good point. I am lazy, where I'm like, if I don't do the scrub during my designated once a week moment, it's not happening.
It's not happening.
So that's probably why I stack it. But I think it's generally. I think maybe the takeaway here is it's all about frequency. We like the consistency of AHAs more than a consistency of a mechanical exfoliation.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's really it. And other than that, it's based on you and your skin.
And I guess the foil to the onboarding question is, how do you level up? I've been at it for some time. I am ready for more.
Gloria.
Oh, a question for me? Okay.
As a queen.
So, let's say you've been on the same toner serum for some time and you're like, you know what, this is fine and all, but I don't get what the hype is all about. It's probably time to look for more of a home peel type product. I think a couple things here. You could have a daily toner or serum and still use a once a week rinse off mask. I find that routine, it's easier to over exfoliate.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah. So when you want to level up to like a home peel, I would say stop the toner and serum and just use it as a once a week thing.
Yeah.
And go from there.
I was also going to add, and one of the pro tips we have is for those of you that have been home peeling pretty religiously, one other product you can actually add in is consider doing a clay mask. And this will kind of help get rid of that excess sebum and kind of leave a incredibly clean slate ready for your home peel. So that would be kind of a pro tip there that we recommend. Yeah.
And I do want to say that if you're sensitive and you're still like itching to level up, I would say aim for a higher concentration of the same molecule you've been using.
Yes.
So we would say if you're normal skin, you're like, hey, lactic acid is not doing it anymore. I'd say, okay, go try glycolic next. But if you're sensitive, then I would say use a higher level of lactic, so there's less risk of you just don't like glycolic acid.
That's such a good point. All right. And then, of course, we've all been here as well. If you're, I done goofed and over exfoliated, what should I do?
Stop, drop, and roll. Centella. But yes, you generally, you want to dial your routine all the way back to the basics.
Yeah.
Definitely don't keep exfoliating. Do not touch that AHA until your skin is back to tip-top shape.
Don't even try dialing it down.
Yeah.
It's time to put that to rest. Put it in the timeout corner for a period of time until you feel like skin is back to its normal self.
Yep. So just focus on cleanse, moisturize, some protection, the end.
And soothing stuff will help you through that period of time.
Yep.
Yeah. But otherwise, hopefully that is a nice quick review of how to use your AHAs and capitalize on its benefits. That's really the end of this podcast.
So if you're curious about this exfoliating world, we have a more comprehensive blog post ready for you to read. Go check out the blog. If you have any questions in addition to what we cover in this episode, definitely reach out to us. And I hope this was helpful.
Yeah. You can find us at our Instagram. You can DM us there at chemist.confessions. You can write to us at our email info@chemistconfessions.com. And all of our blog content is on our website, chemistconfessions.com. But otherwise, we will see you next time. Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.